Hello and welcome to American Friction. It's really very early. I'm still Jacob Jarvis, despite it being very early in the morning. I had a jovial intro to this, but I'm not feeling very jovial right now, so let's skip all of that, I suppose. So, Chris, hello, mate.
You're right.
And Nikki, hey, mate.
Hi.
Hi. So, right, let's lock in, brace ourselves. It's 2 a.m. your time, Nikki. It's about 7 a.m. for us at the moment. So, swing states, we've been talking about them pretty much constantly. North Carolina has been called for Trump, Georgia also, and then Fox has called Pennsylvania, New York Times are calling
Fox
it
has
a
fully
likely
called
win.
the election for Trump.
And then, and now that's happened.
Yeah.
I was building up some
Okay.
tension, but
Don't bury
the lead. No, I know. I was just, getting everyone I don't know what I was doing. Does it totally look like it's game over?
Pretty much. Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, with Pennsylvania gone, there's virtually no path to victory for Harris. And there is very little chance she wins all of the other swing states that she would need now that she's lost Pennsylvania, Georgia, and North Carolina. So it's pretty much game over.
Yeah, I mean, if there's any hope, in 2020 there was this whole red mirage thing, and I've seen some people still talking about that. Why is that different this time out, though?
Yeah.
Because it is, but why?
So the red mirage is a specific electoral phenomenon because did I talk about it on this podcast or on the bunker?
One of them.
One of them. I talked about it on one of them. The United States spans at least 4 time zones. So you start getting your results kind of piecemeal. It'll start on the East Coast and move farther west. And the red mirage refers specifically to a phenomenon where early electoral counts that we get when the polls first close in the East, in sort of some of the central time zones, look like Republicans are really dominating. Early vote counts tend to favor Republicans. Anyway, so early vote counts early on election night tend to favor Republicans. The map looks really red pretty much up until all the polls close and you start getting results from the swing states and the blue wall, which is sort of the northern swing states plus kind of like Maine down to Virginia. Once those counts start coming in, then the map starts looking bluer. But the red mirage is this notion that the map looks really red until you get more results in over the course of the night. That's not what happened here. I think you had a little bit of a red mirage, a red wiggle, a red heat wave. I don't know. Early in the night, but as results started coming in critical swing states, especially Georgia and North Carolina, then Pennsylvania, it became really clear that Harris was underperforming Biden's metrics in 2020. And as the night went on, that gap increased. And now it's a done deal.
Yeah, Chris, looking at bits of the media and stuff like that, how are people and places reacting at the moment?
I think disbelief is clearly the main emotion that a lot of people are feeling right now.
Which I find astounding that the media is in disbelief.
Well,
I can see why Democratic voters are.
What was really interesting was last night in the UK, you could see a lot of commentators and a lot of political journalists saying that perhaps the polls were way off and actually Harris had a bigger lead than the polls might suggest. That there were a lot of people saying that, especially across social media, across Twitter, and I think what that might have done is given a lot of people some kind of, well, I guess on retrospect, false hope.
Yeah.
That the polls weren't right and that they were polling Trump too high. What obviously we've seen as we've woken up this morning is that pretty much the polls weren't miles off. They certainly weren't as far off as a lot of political commentators were saying.
Except perhaps for some of the more positive-looking ones for Harris. For example, this Iowa poll, which everyone was sort of losing their minds over as the gold standard, looks Yeah, it looks like it was fucked. It looked
Like
like
12
it was
points
just
off.
bizarro world. And
Exactly.
that was like everyone was saying, well, this is the best pollster in the country, and if this is right, hey, so
Yeah.
bad day to be a poll watcher, Chris.
I think it
Very
was
bad day.
also,
Mm.
I think I said it, we said it multiple times. It was expected to be a really close race, even
Yeah.
if Kamala Harris had a bit of a breakaway in the final weeks. Everyone, I think the most shocking thing, really, amongst the media, amongst observers even, is that we're getting such a definitive result on election night.
Yeah.
Even maybe around like 10 or 11 p.m., I think the Harris campaign was still putting out signals. Voters were putting out signals. Commentators were discussing the possibility that this might be a 2020 situation where it looked in 2020 like Trump was leading in a lot of these swing states, including Pennsylvania, Wisconsin. And as we got into the early hours of Wednesday and then later on through the week, the results in those swing states flipped to favor Biden. So there was a little bit of a hope that that would be what happened here. But it seems that essentially the culminating effect of Harris underperforming in all of these counties, not reaching the levels that Biden reached in areas where she needed to kind of pull independent voters, pull some Republicans, expand her presence, that cumulative effect handed what looks like most of these swing states to Trump. We're still missing a lot of results, but it really looks like the math is insurmountable at this point. But I will say none of Trump's victories in the states that have been called the swing states that have been called were blowouts. They all seem to be pretty much within that margin of error that we've discussed before.
On the insurmountable side, I mean, I don't want to give any more false hope, and I think anyone realistically at this point, you probably have to wrap your head around the fact that this is Donald Trump has won this. But we are basically saying for that to be any of way, Harris has to basically hold every state you would expect and win all of the other swing states to just about be in with a shot, right? Or is that not even looking like that would be enough right now?
I mean, kind of depends on what map you're looking at. Yeah, if I have been going off the Associated Press's map, which I tend to be sort of the standard bearer for rigorous calls, not calling a state until it's definitive. If Trump wins Pennsylvania as it stands right now at 2:15 a.m. on Wednesday morning, Harris could theoretically win the Electoral College if she wins like Michigan, Wisconsin, Arizona, Nevada, and holds the independent districts in Maine and Nebraska that she needs to hold. That doesn't look likely.
I mean, how are those states looking, Chris?
Well, just coming back to, well, I mean, actually, I'll answer that there. Very close.
Yeah.
You know, I'm certainly not able to call it.
Yeah.
No.
And
No, you are.
No, I'm not. I'm not.
Oh,
And
that's a shame.
I know fuck all, basically.
Chris
Compared
Jones
to a lot
gold
of pollsters.
standard.
Basically, if professional pollsters can't call this, I can't either, Jarv.
Well, I've seen that as we speak, CNN has called Pennsylvania as well,
Yeah.
and I think it's just interesting to look at that sort of thing because I was speaking to some of my friends this morning. It's interesting how your group chats suddenly become a place where you discuss massive electoral politics. And one of my friends liked, you know what I mean? How it just goes in.
As we speak,
MSNBC.
NBC has also called Pennsylvania and has also called the race for Trump.
So
There we go.
like one of my friends said, "Hey, it's a bit like Succession," and said, "Hey, it's a bit like Succession in Fox calling it early sort of thing." And I went, "Yeah, come on, you know that sort of thing isn't quite as. I don't think they're going to play that way this time round." But yeah, for anyone who was maybe holding out hope that it was just Fox News being bolshy to bolster Trump in any sort of fight afterwards, I don't think that is the case.
After the whole debacle with Arizona in 2020, I feel like Fox's decision desk was already coming into this with a sense that they needed to be overcautious. So
yeah,
I mean, Nikki, me and Jarv are miles away.
at least a few.
Yeah,
you can come visit.
And we don't work with Americans every day. We certainly don't work in newsrooms with Americans. And I wondered how how is it in your newsroom? I guess at the moment, how are your colleagues feeling, and what's the conversations like? Is it fairly null? Like, are people genuinely as shocked as well? Me and Jarv are.
I'm not shocked.
I don't think shock is the right word,
Right.
because the reality is that we've known for months now that this was a possibility.
Yeah.
That the polls have been essentially tied for months and months and months now. I think the thing that people are struggling with is the rationalization. Like, how did this happen? Where was the calculus wrong? What went wrong in the messaging? Was it the economy? Is it simply that the way people are feeling about inflation and skyrocketing prices and their inability to buy a home was just an insurmountable election issue? Was it all of the rhetoric on crime? Like, what is it that motivated this level of turnout for Trump, who has been very explicit about the policies that he is proposing and the non-policies he's proposing, just the like vague promises of retribution? I think that's what really is sitting with people, as well as this idea of like, what could the Harris campaign have done better? Was enough done? What's the post-mortem gonna be here? Was it her inability to break with Biden on Gaza? Was the message not specific enough? Should Biden have dropped out sooner? And should Democrats have held an actual competitive primary to pick someone besides Harris? There's going to be a lot of this election is going to be picked over to death. The carcass of this election will sit with us for ages and ages and ages. But I frankly don't think the answers are super clear cut right now, because there's a lot of them. There's also the factors of it is it racism and sexism? Is it, the fact that the United States may simply not be ready to vote for a black woman president, as disgusting as that sounds? Because as we're seeing in like exit polling and early data about this election, men across pretty much every demographic group broke for Trump,
Yeah.
whereas women broke for
It's-
Harris. Yeah, it's
Is that, I suppose, on the on the Democratic side? I think, as you say, there's not one obvious thing that stands out.
Yeah.
And there's on a technical level is something that we'll be able to look at and say, okay, it was this state where things really turned and whatever else, and we'll pick over it. But the more depressing side of it is just that the problems you're mentioning there were fucking obvious to you, me, and Chris.
yeah.
We've been having those conversations here, like that, picking up on Biden earlier.
Yeah.
Holding a proper open primary, the position on Gaza being what felt like just crassly an open political goal for Harris to take. I don't know, when we look back over it, as you say, it's going to be harder to say where did the Democrats get it 100% right.
Yeah.
I suppose, and that's quite difficult. And then another thing with the Republicans, I'd be interesting to know what you think, but how do you think people are going to get their heads around that? We've seen a campaign basically saying they're weirdos, they're strange, they're bizarre, their views are fucking out of this world, odd. But clearly they're actually the more popular views in the country. And I mean, I don't know how you feel about that, or I don't know if that's not necessarily the case, but
yeah.
It's hard to translate how it goes, but clearly the majority of people don't find them as unpalatable as everybody expected they should. I don't know, that's what I find. I don't find any of this surprising, but that's what makes me feel quite jaded and just sad about the whole thing. How do you feel on that? That was a really long, rambling question.
No,
Yeah,
I get where you're coming from, because it's something I've been sitting with in the last few hours, because, it's not official, but it's as close to official as it can be that Donald Trump is going to be the 47th president of the United States. And I'm just sitting with the notion that he's promised to put migrants in camps. that there
Yeah.
is a very high possibility of Republicans implementing a national abortion ban, because Republicans have also won the Senate. We shouldn't forget to tell people that Republicans have
Yeah,
taken
of
control
course.
of the
We'll get
Senate from
into it.
Democrats. If they manage to keep control in the House, they will have a unified Congress under a Republican president. Donald Trump will most likely appoint 2 young, ultra conservative justices to the Supreme Court. They will go after LGBTQ people, trans people, the right to birth control. They will attack civil rights across the nation. And I think the thing that I'm trying to wrap my head around is, are people okay with that? Or do they simply not think it's an actual real possibility? Is
I wonder if they know it as well, because I don't know if you saw there was that Google trend spike in people asking the question, has Joe Biden dropped out?
Mhm.
Like, so there were people on election day. Imagine fucking going to vote in the US election and you did not know Joe Biden dropped out. So
No, but I think
that's another thing is just everything you've said is true, but has that even cut through with voters that they quite realize the gravitas of Trump?
and I think there's a dynamic at play here, because in Trump's first term, Trump didn't expect to win. There's a very infamous story about his like campaign people arriving to the White House and being like, "Oh, so like how many of y'all are staying?" And Obama's staff being like, "Nah, we're leaving. You have to hire your own staff." Like the Trump 2016 campaign didn't expect to win. They didn't come in with a real like concrete plan of action, and they tried to do a lot of really heinous things in Trump's first term that were stymied, either because the people around him opposed it, because the courts got in his way, because he was opposed by the Congress, because XYZ reason he wasn't able to accomplish a lot of these sort of goals that he's been repeating for almost a decade now. This time around, it is very clear that Republicans have a robust plan of action. They're prepared
Yeah.
to hire. They have things like Project 2025 and Agenda 47 that lay the groundwork for at least the first year, if not beyond, of a second Trump administration. So part of me is also, do voters just think, falsely in my opinion, that it will be a repetition of Trump's first term, and like, oh, it wasn't so bad because it wasn't absolutely cataclysmic, when this time around it's very clear that they've been gaming out how to accomplish these goals and go even further than what they were proposing in 2016.
And though, I mean, people like Elon Musk, for example, he posted that meme a few days ago. I don't remember. It was like, it was of a goose asking, why didn't Trump do fascistic thing? You know, why wasn't he a fascist the first time round, was what it was saying. And I mean, people might question about how he acted like a fascist, but his surrogates have very much been playing on that notion to people, as well as saying, okay, well, it wasn't so bad first time around, so don't worry. Whereas this time, the people who've stuck around have learned, and he's also equipped himself with other people who know what they're doing.
He tried to overthrow the government. Like,
yeah.
I mean, as we're sat here, Jarv, the thing I keep thinking of, and I'm interested to get your thoughts on this.
Yeah.
The thing I keep thinking of in reflecting around the feel of this is Brexit. Like, do you think there's some parallels here with the way that Brexit went? And what I mean by that is, this is something that is clearly a vote, almost, I won't say clearly, this is something that is almost a vote against the state and a vote against the people that are in power at the moment, no matter the consequence. Because that's basically how Brexit went, wasn't it?
I think there are some similar dynamics at play with Brexit in that sort of it's a vote against the status quo, and people want that. But my bigger resounding thing, and I mean, we've seen this as well looking over here at some of the British commentators who are now suddenly US political commentators were the most vocal that it was always going to be Harris. It was definitely going to be Harris. And I've seen people who also seem to be certain that Britain wouldn't leave Europe. And the starkest sort of comparison for me, and the most frustrating one, is just this, that the media class clearly doesn't know how the public feel about a lot of stuff, or are bad at gauging it. polling is bad at picking it up as well. But then it's just generally a problem for the left is this blindness in this kind of notion that the left's morals are the right ones and therefore a consensus and majority must appreciate them. And I'm not saying that I disagree that Kamala Harris has... There are things I disagree with Kamala Harris on, but generally, if I'm looking at the morals of her or Donald Trump, I would go for Harris. If I were looking at the principles of the Democrats versus the GOP, I'd go for the Democrats. But this kind of, I don't know, sort of laziness and desire to just sink in and go, well, but we're right, so that will prevail. And what we think is good and is the best practice, that will win. And it does feel like that is just a constant sort of lackadaisical feeling from the institutions of the left and centre left.
I suppose what we've seen, especially from a lot of international political commentators over here, especially, is the reporting with hope almost more than with facts.
Yeah. The hope thing is big because I was coming this morning thinking about how do we frame this conversation, and I was looking at it and I was going, well, you know, is there some hope? Do people want to? And I think people are reaching for that. But one thing that, you know, I like to think that, I'm sorry if we've depressed anyone listening in, but we haven't looked at the race like this. We've looked at the race going, well, what does the race look like? And we've looked at, well, who looks up and down. I think there has been a sort of, rose-tinted glasses view of the Harris campaign. How do you feel? I think, you know, the whole Brat Summer shit and stuff like that, which it sounds like a very silly thing for me to be talking about on the morning that Donald Trump likely becomes, president-elect. But I just thought this is all just bullshit. It's all just overly hopeful, overly hyped.
Yeah. I mean, there is a clear reason. I mean, I know we've joked about it in previous episodes about me asking journalists and experts what they think around the race. And there is a genuine reason why no one was wanting to predict it. But that's because this reality that we're living in at the moment, where Trump looks ever more likely like he's going to be the next president of the United States, was always possible. It was always there. And I think what some parts of the media have done is laughed that off. And they shouldn't have done that.
No, I think it, you know, I don't want to be overly critical of anyone we've had on this show. They've all been very generous with their time, and I appreciate it very much. I think some people were hesitant to call it because they didn't want to sort of vocalize it's going to be Donald Trump, as if that would kind of bring it into reality in some way. And maybe in some quarters there has to have been more honesty on the fact that it could or looked like it would be Trump.
Yeah, but also Nikki hit the nail on the head a second ago when she said that Trump was never meant to win in 2016. Trump was never meant to win ever. This was more of a popularity booster for him when he first became interested in politics. And I watched his Saturday Night Live monologue. I think that was in 2012 or 2014. It was about 8 or 10 years ago, anyway. And even he didn't take himself seriously.
Yeah,
like not at all. So why should anyone else? And I think that is something that has stuck in the minds of a lot of people, especially journalists, as the years have gone on, is that they just haven't taken him seriously, and they should really.
Well, I suppose with that, bouncing off that point from Chris there, Nikki, I'd be curious to know your thoughts on this, on the sort of taking it seriously point. Has that been maybe on the campaign failures? The whole weird thing to me is starting to look like it kind of didn't work. And for example, people like JD Vance, for example, who looked so weird at one point, and then I began to see him on things like, you know, certain podcasts and stuff like that, and saw loads of, you know, more right-leaning men saying, "Oh, he's not so weird, see, and he's all right." But this kind of calling these people not serious it seems like a tactic on one way, but what they represent you have to take very seriously. And has that been something that maybe some critical people have struggled to do? Like, it's sort of, you can take the piss out of Trump, but you do have to take everything behind him and the mechanics and the machinery around Trump very, very seriously, which people maybe haven't quite done in their attempts to I don't know, bring him down?
I actually think it was the opposite with the weird situation. It was
Okay.
cutting through really well for the first couple weeks, and then for some reason throughout like late September and a big chunk of October, the Harris campaign like really sidelined Tim Walz, which is something that
Yeah, I did think he
still,
went quiet.
yeah, it still doesn't make sense to me why they did it, because I think Walz was actually one of the most effective communicators the campaign had on this message of taking these people seriously, taking the threat of a second Trump administration seriously, but communicating that to people in a way that was relatable. It
Mm.
And again, this, we're gonna pick this campaign to death, but that's one that's still sitting with me, is why Walz was sidelined. And I think the conversations about like Trump's fascist tendencies are
Mm.
really important. The authoritarian impulses that he has are really important and incredibly serious. But I do think in the last weeks of the campaign, or in the last days really, because this campaign was still incredibly short, in the last kind of closing segment of the campaign, focusing on that over a message more concretely focused on like the economy and reproductive
Mm.
rights, I think that may have played to Harris's detriment.
Just on that point of Waltz being sidelined, do you think that the debate with Vance, and the way that that went, played any part in the reason as to why he was, as you say, sidelined? Do you think that perhaps he came across as too close on some issues with Vance, and the media picked up on that, or am I just way off?
No, I think the thing about that debate is that Walz pretty much stuck to his positions. I think it was Vance who more frequently aligned himself with Walz. I think
Mm.
the sidelining was happening before the debate, if we're being honest, and quite
Right.
frankly, I think within 2 weeks, no one remembered that debate.
No, but
Yeah.
with that debate though, I do think that did start a turning point of it. Vance was no longer the easy
Yeah,
punching bag that he had been.
yeah.
And
Vance came off as
before
normal.
that point.
Mhm.
Yeah, and then he did all, the sort
And
of
I think that's kind of what I mean, is that
yeah.
realistically, for me as a strategist, and I probably wouldn't be a very good one even if I was,
You would.
but going into that debate, the plan really should have been to make Vance look as weird as he's been coming across in his own
Yeah.
media appearances. The childless cat lady rant and
Yeah.
the Haitian migrants lie. And I mean, we're talking about it now. Vance came across not as bad as that.
No.
And I do think some onus, probably has to go to Waltz on that performance during that debate.
With so Trump is speaking at the moment, and I mean the guy is really pushing it till the end, in that he's claimed victory in the popular vote, even though we obviously don't know that
No.
at this point. But
That would be
mean,
wild.
no Republican has won that since 2004.
Mhm.
So yeah, that would be big. He's also suggesting it looks like they'll keep control of the House of Representatives, and we know that
That
they
is
have
a little less
won the Senate.
likely.
Yeah, that's what I wanted to ask you. I mean, looking down to that on the congressional level, I mean, how is the House? Is the House the last? It looks like it'd be the final sort
Yeah.
of blocker.
The last bastion.
The
on
last
Trump, at
bastion.
least.
Yeah, so the
Yeah.
House, from all the analysis I'm seeing from people who are smarter than me, will likely come
No one's
down.
smarter than you.
There's several.
No
I can
one.
think of a few.
No, I can't think of any.
No.
But it's probably going to come down to California. California is where
Hmm.
some of the more competitive toss-ups are. And the thing about California is that California, as big as it is, and despite the fact that it counts its presidential votes pretty early, it's a little slower when it comes to reporting down ballot races. So we might
Mm.
not get those results for like a week or so, maybe longer, because California, also liberal state, loves expanding the right to vote to everyone. They continue to accept absentee and I think mail-in ballots for like a week after the election. I think as long as you like mail it by the day of the election, they'll accept it if it comes in. So they're still going to be receiving votes. That one will wait a second. Nancy Pelosi, I think either Tuesday or Monday said that she feels confident that Democrats will be able to take the House. And if they do, Hakeem Jeffries will very quickly be confirmed as Speaker of the House for the Democrats. And they will be tasked with essentially doing what Republicans have been doing for the past 2 years, which is, to the best of their ability, fucking up the Republican agenda.
Yeah. I think on that note, we've kind of covered pretty much as much as we can at this point.
I
can't
think
we?
there's
How do
one
you-
more point I should add,
Okay.
because it gets kind of lost in the shuffle sometimes, that it cannot be overstated that the former and next president of the United States is a convicted felon who has been found liable for sexual assault, is facing multiple criminal trials, which he will now be able to get out of, and has been handed most of the levers of power in this country. And that's something that I think all of us have to sit with.
Yeah, it's.
I mean, he's escaped.
Yeah,
essentially.
Yeah,
the gravity of it, and for someone who, he basically appeared to be running this campaign to avoid criminal justice and to make money because of it, and then now he gets all of that, and he gets to wreak havoc upon the country and the world.
I think he is plainly the most narcissistic US presidential candidate that there has ever been. There's never been a reason for him to run that is for the betterment of the people of the United States. It's always been for him. In 2016, it was to raise his profile and his popularity. Now it's to escape criminal charges and not get locked up in prison. There is nothing about his campaign that screams, I want to do the best for the American people and the world.
Yeah.
And I'll throw in there, I still believe that in a lot of ways, Trump does not give a shit about policy. This idea of narcissism that you're bringing up, Chris, I think is entirely correct. He's not necessarily interested in winning this office because he wants to implement a very detailed agenda that he's going to be very involved in. He's throwing open the doors for an extremist Republican project that has built their presence around him. And he just has to get into office and, in a way, get out of the way. He's getting what he wanted.
Yeah, he simply wants to be president. What that actually means in terms of a job and whatever else is not really what he's interested in. It doesn't seem to be. Plenty of golf on the way, I imagine. Guys, thanks very much for a somber edition of American Friction. Nikki, thanks very much, mate.
Cheers. Also, if you haven't tried it, vermouth on the rocks, delicious.
Nice. Chris, thank you very much, mate.
Thank you, and thank you, Jarv, as well. Thanks for being with us. And it's important to say that we're going to stick with this in the future. We're really going to stick with it and really, unpack everything we can and explain everything for people, aren't we?
Yeah, I like to think we've tried to be honest and fair throughout the campaign, and I hope we continue to do so in what are very uncharted waters. And Nikki, I very much appreciate you staying on a very even level and talking through all of this at a time where, I know this affects you personally in a way closer than it does Chris or I. So yeah, we appreciate it, and we'll continue to.
Love you, Nikki.
I love you guys. Mwah.
If you want to help us keep going as well, search American Friction Podcast Patreon, or go to patreon.com/American Friction directly to sign up. There's a link in the show notes. As Chris says, we're going to be here keeping track of everything along the way. You've been listening to American Friction. We'll see you soon.